suradnik u Istorijskom institutu u Beogradu i naslov njegovog izlaganja je Savez i neophodnosti Arpadskog kraljevstvo i države Nemanjića krajem 13. veka.
Hvala vam. Trudit ću se da se držim pomenutih 15 minuta, ne zamerite ako pređem minut ili dva. My presentation will be basically a follow-up of Jura's text. So basically these to deal with two, at first glance, separate topics, but to offer a somewhat new interpretation of the turbulent events of the second half of the 13th century, and of course their impact on the relations between the Árpád and the Nemanjić dynasty. The first topic can be tentatively, very tentatively called the dowry of Queen Jelena. Jelena, the wife of Serbian King Uroš I, and the mother of King Stefan Dragutin and Stefan Uroš Milutin. And as you all know, her origin was one of the most disputed genealogical issues related to the Nemanjić dynasty. However, as you also probably know, some 4 decades ago, in a small yet valuable article published in Ungar Nerdbuch, Gordon McDaniel convincingly showed that Jelena was born out of the marriage of John Angelos, already mentioned by Jura Hardy, the Lord of Sirmia, who descended both from Byzantine imperial lineage and Hungarian royal family. And Jelena's mother was Matilda of Požega, who was by her mother's side, so Jelena's grandmother, of Kurtene family, which gave the Latin emperors of Constantinople. I will not go here into details regarding McDaniel's hypotheses, nor with some small additions that need to be inserted in his conclusions. But what is important here is the already proven fact that Jelena was the daughter of John Angelos of Sirmia and Matilda of Požega. And equally important is so-called Jelena's dowry, and by that I mean the land of Macho or Sirmia Ulterior, as this region on the right bank of the Sava River was called in Hungarian and also other medieval sources. So, to cut the long story short, Jelena's marriage with King Uroš was concluded around 1250. Probably it was arranged under the auspices of Hungarian King Bela IV. And at the time of her marriage, both Jelena and her younger sister Maria, whom I also have to mention briefly, were landless. Maria was married to Anselm de Caio the Younger, the son of the namesake Bailli or regent of the Latin Empire of Constantinople. So, as we had the opportunity to hear, the land of Macho, Terra Macho, which belonged to their father, was at that time, at the time of marriage of both Jelena and Maria, given to Rostislav Mihailovich, son-in-law of King Bela IV. After these preliminary remarks, we can now turn to the first event that requires our attention. Oh yeah, this is the genealogical tree, unfortunately only in Serbian, I didn't have time to prepare it in English, showing the position of both sisters, the older Jelena and the younger Maria, and their relations with Arpads, with Kurtenes, with Lascaris, and of course with the French royal family. We have to turn to the dispute which occurred between Uroš and Bela IV. When Nemanjić ruler suddenly attacked the land of Mačva, which was at that time the possession of Prince Bela, the grandson of King Bela IV and son of Rostislav Mihailovich, who was not among the living at that time. This incursion took place, as Ivana Komatina recently showed, not in 1268, as you mentioned, but in early 1266. The date is important, not only because the events took place a couple of years earlier than was previously thought, but because also of the formidability of the arguments. But what is important for me here? As far as I know, neither the Serbian nor Hungarian historians attempted to illuminate the motivation of King Uroš to attack Mačva, at least so far, so I will try to do that. At first glance, it is difficult to explain why Uroš, who previously affirmed himself as Bela's trustworthy ally, opted for such a course of action, a military course of action. However, circumstances are becoming clear if you take into account Jelena and her origin. So, Jelena was the older of the two daughters of John Angelos. She could claim her father's heritage, either for herself or rather for her eldest son, Dragutin, future Serbian king and also titular king of Sirmia. So, the incursion of Uroš took place at the time when Rostislav was not among the living, when Mačva was the possession of his underage son, and also at the time when Dragutin came of age, when he was approximately 14 years old, so adult, according to medieval standards. And there is another curious piece of information, which circumstantially, I think, confirms my hypothesis, that Uroš attacked Mačva to assert the rights of Jelena and their children, in fact the oldest child, Dragutin. A particle of true cross that Uroš carried in this campaign, which is recorded in Hungarian sources, as one of the spoils of war. When Uroš was captured, his son-in-law was captured, the Serbian the king's standard was captured, and also the particle of the true cross, which fell into the Hungarian hands. We know that Jelena had the same relic, a particle of true cross, and it is recorded in her vita, written by Serbian Archbishop Danilo. So it seems that Uroš used the relic in the attack of Mačva, the relic that belonged to the queen, to justify his campaign. At least this is my idea. Now, I will, due to the time limit, omit the well-known details of ÁRPÁD-NEMANJIĆ relations following the defeat of Uroš in 1266. As you are aware, I'm following Komatina's proposed chronology here. So, including the marriage of Dragutin, the oldest son of Uroš and Jelena, to Hungarian Princess Katalin, daughter of Bela's son István V, and Elizabeth the Kuman. And the subsequent rebellion of Dragutin against his father, in which he enjoyed Hungarian support, and which ended with the overthrow of Uroš in 1276. The issue of Queen Jelena's dowry, which interests us here, remained unsolved for 2 more decades, and the next event to which we have to turn our attention took place in 1284, during the reign of István's son, Ladislaus IV, so-called Kuman. Yeah, I'm still in the same slide. Namely, at that time, by the wish of Ladislaus IV, the lands of Mačva and also Usur and Soli in northeastern Bosnia were taken from Elizabeth, mother of the king, and given to Dragutin. Dragutin, who was 2 years older, forced to, as it is usually said in Serbian historiography, to abdicate from the throne of Raška. In fact, it was not abdication, it was rather a territorial division, because Dragutin kept the northern parts of the kingdom of Raška, including the valley of Western Morava and Rudnik. And with the addition of Mačva and adjoining lands, basically a separate political entity was created that merged northern Serbian and southern lands of the Hungarian crown. But it seems, at least in my interpretation of events, that his acquisition of Mačva was a move aimed to put an end to the dispute that obviously hampered the relations between the 2 dynasties. In such a way, the land of Mačva legally remained the possession of Hungarian crown, but was given as a fief to its rightful heir. Rightful heir because Dragutin was the grandson of John Andreas. Everybody happy. Unfortunately, it was not destined to be. The donation was motivated not only by the desire of Ladislaus IV to solve the disputed status of Mačva, but also dire external and internal political circumstances in the Arpadian kingdom. Namely, the insecure conditions on the Hungarian southern border. To the east of Mačva and adjoining Belgrade, which was obviously part of Terra Mačva, at least in a wider sense, or technical sense, lay the land of Braničevo and Kučevo to the east of Morava River. In fact, both lands appear as a pair, but Kučevo was obviously on the right bank of Morava River, as Aleksandar showed some 20 years ago, but still it's worth it to mention his valuable conclusions. So it was ruled at that time by the local magnates, half-brothers of mixed Kuman and Bulgarian origins, notorious Dorman and Kudelin. A decade earlier, they renounced their loyalty to the Hungarian crown and in fact became independent, and the attempts of the trusted king's magistrate, Judge Šovari, appointed by Ladislaus IV to subdue rebellious lord of Braničevo, ended in vain. Yeah, we can stay here. So, it is not a chance, István Vasari wrote about that also very convincingly, that administrative changes in Mačva, I mean by administrative changes the acquisition of Mačva by Dragutin, coincided with the end of unsuccessful Šovari's campaign against Dorman Bulgarians, as it is mentioned in Hungarian charters. Furthermore, a conflict between Dragutin and the lords of Braničevo soon erupted, and obviously Dragutin simply continued the earlier policies of the Hungarian royal court in the region. Now, the exact time of Dragutin's campaign against Braničevo is difficult to determine, but it can be broadly dated in the second half of the penultimate decade of the 13th century, not long after he was invested in the possession of Mačva, or Sirmia, as recorded by Archbishop Danilo, who does not give much detail about this campaign, but he's our only source. So, we know that Dragutin was the one who attacked their neighbors, not the other way around, and also we know that Dragutin was unsuccessful. He was unable to capture the fortified dormant stronghold of Ždrela. Meanwhile, important events were taking place elsewhere. In the fall of 1284, the so-called Second Mongol invasion of Hungary took place. So this is the time to take into account the second topic I intended to deal, but very, very briefly, the influence of the Tatar factor of Serbian-Hungarian rapprochement. Due to the time limit, I will skip the intricate details of the so-called Second Mongol invasion and will focus only on one particular consequence. Namely, after the invasion, the Hungarian crown was put to defensive in the southwestern Carpathians, and the Banat of Sarajevsky or Severin War was lost for Hungarian crown somewhere around 1290, exactly at the time of the treacherous death of Vladislaus IV, who was killed by his Cuman followers. But what is important here to notice is that at that time, Dorman and Kudelin, the lords of Braničevo, became dependent on Nogaj, and that they recruited the mercenaries, the Tatar mercenaries from the left bank of Danube, from the West Wallachia, to take a counter-offensive against Dragutin. Also, we have to turn to Danilo, who relates how they managed to capture Mačva, to drive Dragutin away, and then how Milutin accepted his brother, who was a refugee at that time, and how he agreed to help him, how the two Serbian kings together undertook a campaign against the lords of Braničevo, managed to take Braničevo, and how Milutin gave Braničevo to his older brother Dragutin. This is what Danilo says in short. Now, there is another important point. Danilo does not mention the participation of Hungarian forces in the campaign that led to the ultimate defeat of Dorman and Kudelin. However, two charters of Andrew III, the successor of Vladislaus IV, the last king of the ARPAD dynasty, Andrew, they further illuminate events and reveal another very important perspective of the conflict. A first charter is from 1298, mentioning the merits of three brothers and Ugrinus Shak, Magister Ugrinus Shak, in the fight against the Tatars. I will skip the details again due to the time limit. Second charter is from 1293, and it is important because it mentions another conflict between Hungarian forces and Tatars in Mačva. Tatars, obviously, part of the army recruited by Dorman and Kudelin, and gives the date of the events. Late 1291, early 1292, in the winter time, during the second year of the reign of Andrew III. So this is important because it obviously shows that the defeat of Dorman and Kudelin, strengthened by Nogaj's Tatars, was due to the joint actions not only of the two Serbian kings, Dragutin and Milutin, but also the forces of the Hungarian crown, or Andrew III, and that at the time the Serbian and Hungarian side obviously formed a de facto military alliance against Nogaj, as well as his dependence in northwestern Bulgarian lands. So, as a conclusion, the Hungarian military support helped Dragutin and Milutin to gain the upper hand in the initial clashes with the Nogaj's proteges, while the two Serbian kings obviously served in the best interest of the Arpad kingdom by driving the attention of the Tatars from the Hungarian borders. And there is another frequently neglected reflection of the rapprochement between the Arpad and Nemanjic dynasties, and that is marriage between King Milutin and Elizabeth, the sister of Catalin and the daughter of István V and Elizabeth the Cuman. I guess I have it in the slide. And to cut a long story short, this marriage was concluded around 1292, and although it was usually presented as a fair, this is how the Byzantine sources speak about the marriage. It was not an affair, it was a legitimate marriage. We have the confirmation in the two independent Western sources. Also, we are certain that the marriage took place after 1291, because this is the time when first Elizabeth's husband, Czech noble Zaviš of Falkenstein, died, in fact he was murdered. So the marriage probably took place around 1292, exactly at the time of the clashes in Dorman and Kudelin, and also at the time when Milutin lost the support of his father-in-law, legitimate Bulgarian ruler, George III, who was forced to flee from Tarnovo. It was exactly the time when the marriage between Milutin and the underage daughter of George III was dissolved. If this marriage was consummated and all, but probably it wasn't. So Milutin was able to marry Elizabeth. The point is, this marriage was not an affair, it had a political purpose and strong political background, as it was surprisingly usually the case with dynastic marriages. So it also served to strengthen the ties between these two dynasties in the very troubling times. As a side note, I'm almost over, the marriage between Milutin and Elizabeth lasted approximately until 1298, and we also know that the royal couple had two daughters. Anna, who later became an empress of Bulgaria, and Tsaritsa, who had an unusual eponymic name, and who was later betrothed to a member of the Capetian family, a younger son of Charles de Valois, but this marriage, as we all know, never took place. So here I attempted to look upon the relations between Arpads and Nemanjić in the end of the 13th century through the two important, but in my opinion, neglected issues. First is the tentative dowry of Queen Jelena, or the disputed legal status of Mačva, and second is, oh, sorry, I was too hasty. And the second is the threat of Nogai that necessitated the making of Serbian-Hungarian alliance against the common adversary. So the Tatar threat greatly diminished in the following years, as Nogai entered the conflict with the legitimate Khan of the Golden Horde, Tokhta, which led to his downfall and demise in late 1299. But on the other hand, as I mentioned before, Mačva again became a seat of discord at the beginning of the 14th century, after the death of Jelena in 1314, then Dragutin 2 years later. Namely, after Dragutin's death, Milutin, the younger son of Russian Jelena, attempted to disinherit Dragutin's son Vladislav and to grab Mačva for himself, which led to his bloody conflict with the first Angevin king of Hungary, Charles Roberto. And this conflict, whose roots lay in the claims of Queen Jelena and her descendants over this land, the land of Mačva, was continued by Queen's grandson Stefan Dušan and King Louis the Great throughout much of the 14th century. And a last couple of words here as a conclusion. Namely, in my opinion, the long-lasting conflict over Mačva was not a border dispute as it was usually presented in historiography, nor it was a Serbian-Hungarian conflict by its character. It did not have any ethnic, any national background. It was purely a legitimistic and dynastic issue. That's why it lasted so long, almost like 100 years war. It was revolving around unresolved inheritance rights within the two families, or even more properly speaking, and considering the multiple mutual ties between the Arpads and Nemanjić, it may be even said the different branches of the same family. And thank you very much for your attention.